Dr. Jazz.
Dive in into. I'm really curious about this stuff. I mean, before last week, I didn't even know about that. Then you,
Oh, the movie.
yeah. I mean, I know you played with Roy. He's on your album, and I know that Oscar Peterson project you guys did together. But like, what's
Yeah.
your story with Roy Hargrove? We're talking about. I mean, where did you guys begin?
Well, I first met Roy in about 1988 or so. In Boston, James Williams brought me up to Boston. I was living in New York at the time, and he brought me up to play a gig with a couple of new young guys that were in town that he was, excited about. One was Roy Hargrove, and one was Jeff Keezer.
Wow.
And so it was James and I, and the bass player escapes me at the moment. Forgive me, it was a long time ago. But James was always, very supportive of the younger musicians around, of all the musicians really. But if he heard or met a young musician that was, pretty serious, he would do what he could to help. This is back in the late 80s, of course, and things were a lot different back then. But that's how I first met Roy and Jeff. And then the following year, a guy by the name of Larry Clothier approached me at Bradley's and said he was Roy's manager and was putting together a European tour, and he wanted to bring me in the band.
Oh, wow.
It was Roy, myself, Jimmy Cobb, Walter Booker, Jeff Keezer.
Oh, nice.
Jeff Keezer. I'm missing. He's a guitar player named Tonk. Okay, so it's Cobb, Booker, Keezer, Tonk, me, and Roy. Yeah, that's 6.
Oh.
And we toured around for about a month in Europe, and it was wonderful. I had a great time. Roy was, of course, already playing well beyond his years, and Jeff Keezer also, I have to say, he was amazing at that age as well. And that's how I met and got to know Roy. And we finished the tour, and shortly after that, we did his first record, which was called Diamond in the Rough.
Oh yeah, exactly.
And as the years went by, we were playing gigs here and there. We both recorded with Cedar Walton. We recorded together on my record, as you mentioned. And we were on the scene. We worked a lot at Bradley's, and I think we worked at the Vanguard together with a different group. And it's just the way it was back then, Yeah.
Yeah. Did you guys play even afterwards, like after the 2000s or like later?
The last time I worked with Roy was up in Toronto with kind of an all-star band. It was a concert. The last time I saw him was at the Blue Note. He was working with his band, and he let me sit in. And I think that was, he died in 2018, so that was probably 2017.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow.
Yeah, that was the last time I saw him. Elion had begun shooting for the film, I guess, in early 2018. And she was aware that she was involving me. So she shot 2018. Roy passed, I guess, later that year, November 2nd.
Yeah.
So during production of the film, Roy died, which we were all shocked. And the film, the camera follows Roy through the last year of his life, essentially. New York, France, Italy, I think 2 continents and maybe 5 or 6 cities.
Oh, wow.
of course, the idea was to capture a year of Roy Hargrove. We didn't know it was going to be his last year.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
it became very profound after that.
it's incredible. Man. Yeah, and what's your involvement now with this movie? I mean,
well, my involvement was on the production side.
oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, I was able to be helpful and what's the word? I was able to help. You know, I was able to, you know, on the production end, and you know, I was, you know, I did whatever I could, you know. I was resourceful. I brought in a great music licensing guy out here, Matt Lilly. He has a company out here that does all the music for all the big movies. And he's a tenor player.
Oh,
somebody
okay.
I knew. Yeah. So, you know, but his main living is he listens his music for movies. You know, in various ways, I did what I could to help, you know, researching photos, you know, and things like that, reaching out to, you know, making a film is, you know, I don't know, it's impossible. Yeah, I'm just a
musician. Just imagine, yeah.
Yeah, but I was able to help, you know, in many ways because of my proximity to Roy, and, you know, I knew the people that in his circle that he, you know, worked with and so on and so forth. So, you know, I became somewhat of an asset, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. Looking forward to see this. I mean, really.
We hope that to premiere it this year sometime.
Yeah.
That's as much as I can say right now.
Yeah, yeah. Super. I mean, I'm really looking forward. I mean, I always, you know, as sad as it is, also the movie is also like, you know, it's nice to see.
Yeah. We are all so proud of the film, man. I mean, I think it's absolutely beautiful and moving. And, you know, Sonny Rollins, Herbie Hancock, Wynton, Questlove, Mos Def, Erykah Badu.
Oh, man.
You know, there's a serious cast and, you know, of people that are interviewed for the film. And, you know, it's shot in beautiful, you know, places. And Roy is just a star on camera. I mean, he's just a natural.
Yeah, can imagine. Yeah, sure. Incredible, super. Yeah, looking forward to this one. Ralph, I wanted to start before I knew about this Roy movie. I wanted to ask you about Three Score, and you know, I was so happy when it came out, like, which is now 3 years ago already. And you know, I still, people talk, you know, every musician I talk to, or either a friend or, you know, I talked with Kikoski a couple of weeks ago, and everyone is raving about your 80s records as a leader. You know, I was so happy when Three Score came out. And what was the story behind that one, that you finally decided to do that one? And
it's on Willie Jones's label, you know, the drum.
Yeah.
And we had started working together, and he said, you know, I want to record you. And you know, I said sure, and you know, he said, we just, like, you know, write some tunes and you know, we'll record it out in LA. You know, I got to be honest with you, Samo. You know, I was having some health issues at the time, and, you know, I wasn't too confident going in because of that. But it seems that some nice things came out on the record, you know, and that would be the first record of my own since the 90s. So, you know, that was new. Things have changed so much since then. You know, I hope to record some more, and, you know, I'm feeling much better now, and, you know, I'm looking forward to life going forward, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds super on that one, like Another Time, and those tracks, and the Donnie, I think they're like beautiful stuff. You know, And it's so nice to see you again as band leader. I mean, I love that.
Thank you so much. I gotta.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
I can take that call.
Yeah, no worries. I'll cut that out later.
I'll have to hit him back. I got to go to Vancouver at the end of the week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's setting me up for that. I'll call him back.
Oh, okay. Otherwise, I wanted to ask you about. You mentioned like New York in the 80s and that it was different, let's say late 80s. But I'm really always curious about when people come to New York and how was that like for you? I mean, I have you on so many records at home, from Roy Haynes to Horace Silver, everything that you've done in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And how was that like for you when you came to New York, like that first experience, if you remember? And
you're a guitar player, right? So you probably know Kevin Eubanks.
Oh, sure.
He and his brother Robin. His brother Robin actually. I was still in Boston, and I was, gigging and practicing a lot and doing odd jobs to try to make money. And Kevin called me up on a Monday evening. He said, "My brother just found a place in Brooklyn. We're gonna drive out there up to New York on Wednesday." Or down to New York on Wednesday. What are you doing? And I said, well, I'm just nothing. I'm staying with a friend, sleeping on his floor and out in Jamaica, And he said, well, why don't you come with us? You might as well sleep on the floor in New York if you're sleeping on the floor in Boston. So they pulled by Wednesday evening, two evenings later with the van, and I grabbed my horn. I had about $275. And I threw some clothes in a little trunk, and I threw it in the van, and I moved to New York. it just happened like that. And I'm laughing because at the time guys were. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get is my head cut off here?
No, okay. You're super. Great.
So guys, I'm saving up to move to New York, and I'm getting my I got to practice. I'm gonna try, and for me it just happened like that, and I had almost no money. I mentioned $275. And so I got to New York, and, I've always been kind of independent, right? So I'm everybody else has some cash saved up. It was Robin, it was Kevin, and a drummer by the name of Sam Allen, who's still in New York. He's living in Queens now. He has a family. And I was the only one that really didn't have any bread. So the first thing I did was I went out and got the Village Voice and started looking for a job. I was never too proud to work, and within a week, the span of a week, I had gotten a job working at a bakery, very early hours on the cash register, a place called Bet's Best on 8th Avenue. And I wish I would love to see that woman again. She was the sweetest person. I'm so grateful to her. And so now I've got a job, right? And so now the guys are looking at me like, well, our money's going to run out. He's got a job. We need to keep him here. So now we're okay. So now we have an understanding. We got a 1-bedroom floor through in Brooklyn on Park Place, and there's 4 of us living in there. So it was tight. And but we're in New York, So okay, now I've got a job. So the next week, I said, okay, let me go find a jam session. And the first place I went to was called the Jazz Forum, which is now up in Westchester, up in Tarrytown, I believe. But at that time, it was down in the East Village in Cooper Union. Are you familiar with New York? Yeah. So it was Mark Morganelli still, and Joe Jones Jr. was running the session. He had the clipboard with the list, and they'd sign you up, and you'd come up for 2 tunes, And of course, this was the 80s, so there were a lot of heavy people around still. A lot of people in New York at that time that aren't here anymore. So when Joe Jones called me up, the drummer was a guy named Harold White. The trumpet was still around. His name is Barry Reese.
Oh yeah, sure.
And he plays a little drums, a trumpet player, and some other guys on the session for those couple of tunes, and we played. I'm nervous as hell. My first time, sitting in New York, And we get done with our two tunes, and Barry and Harold, they kind of corner me and say, you know, what's your name, man? You know, you give me your number. And, you know, Harold's like, you know, we work with Horace Silver's quintet. He's going to be looking for a tenor player and a bass player. He's going to be in town. This was October. He's going to be in town in January. He's going to be auditioning people. Yeah, I'd like to give him your number. So I'm like, yeah, sure. I honestly didn't think anything about it. I just got to town. You know, I'm looking to learn something here. And, you know, back in those days, it was about go to New York and get your feet wet and try to learn. Yep. You know, it's totally different attitude now. So the third week, Horace Silver calls me. You know, this guy calls me, hey, this is Horace Silver. I got your number from my drummer. He thinks I should hear you. You know, and I'm like, I'm sort of in disbelief that this is Horace Silver on the phone, but I play along and it's actually Horace Silver. And I said, well, yeah, sure. And he says, all right, I'll be there in a couple of months. I'll call you. He called me. And, you know, I went down and auditioned. I had to come back a couple of days and audition again. And by the end of the week, he said, okay, I don't know what it is about you, but something I'm hearing some promise somehow, which back in those days, code meant you better get your shit together because, you know, that's what that meant. I'm hearing something. As with the old guys, like, you know, I hear something I like, that means you got a lot of freaking work to do, dude. So I ended up on the band. And of course, I quickly realized I'm in very deep water here. You know, I mean, I got to New York 23, so I turned 24 that December. The following month, I'm on Horace's band. And you know, I thought I knew a little something. I found out very quickly, I didn't know squat.
Yeah.
You know, and Horace was patient. He said, you got a week, 6 days, and I'm taking the book back. I don't allow music on the bandstand. You know, so I had a week to learn the book. You know, if you know Horace's writing, it's like intros and head and interlude and shout chorus. Some of those things are quite involved. But when you're playing 6 nights a week, you know, and plus I'm playing all day in the hotel trying to learn this stuff, you're getting a lot more time in playing back in those days. You know, you might do a 2-week run in the club. You know, back then we would do 2 weeks at Ronnie Scott's. We would go to Chicago, do 2 weeks. You know, I mean, it's not like it is now. It was a lot of playing. And so I managed to get the book together pretty quick. And when I didn't get together at rehearsal, he'd stop the man and say, wait a minute, that first ending there, that's these notes. You know, I pretty much had the bulk of it, but it's a lot to get together. But I managed to get the book together. And now I had to really learn how to play, you know. Horace would coach me. I would practice all the time and study. And, you know, I had to sort of bring myself up to the level of the guys around me. So it was scary, but it was also, you know, really incredible experience. And, you know, I hung out in that band for about 4.5 years. The band began to change around me. You know, Tom Harrell came back in for some tours. Eventually, you know, Brian Lynch came in. The last band that I was in was me and Brian on the front line. And I also began working with Roy Haynes around that time too. So when Horace wasn't working, you know, Roy would be pulling me in for gigs, and you know, I really believe I learned how to swing with Roy. I mean, he's just incredible musician, incredible drummer, but his sense of time and his sense of swing is really what I gradually began to adapt to. And I really think that what I learned from Roy, I took that and I used that everywhere. That worked everywhere. You know?
Sure. Yeah. How did the gig with Roy happen in between? Like, while you were
Kevin, who I was living with at the time, he got the gig with Roy Haynes. And, you know, I think Donald Harrison was still playing with Roy at the time, and some different guys. And Donald Harrison left to go work on the road with Jack McDuff. So I had sat in with Roy. By this time, Kevin had brought me to sit in a few times. So Roy brought me in. And after a couple of weeks, Donald came back because being on the road with Jack McDuff was no joke.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you were seriously on the road in the van. You had to carry the organ in and out of the rooms. You know, that was a rough gig, man. But that was another great gig, dude. That was another very seriously
one of the greats. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, now I didn't get to play with Jack. Donald did, you know. But I mean, that's just kind of way it was in those guys. You came to New York in those days, and you would try to get on a gig and try to play with one of these masters, you know, and try to learn something.
Yeah.
It wasn't about self-promotion. And in my first album, when the last thing I wanted to do was record. I didn't think I was ready for that, you know. You try to learn, you know. You finish school, you go to New York, and now you really try to learn the music.
Yeah, that's what everyone said. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
And that's how I got in Roy's band, you know. But it took me months and months to learn how to play with Roy. I really think he was frustrated with me the first 6 months because I didn't have any concept of time insofar as where he was coming from.
Yeah, know? It's different than Horace. Yeah, completely different vibe and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. But I finally understood what Roy was doing and what he was talking to me the whole time on the drums. It's very much about the dialogue, you know, and I hadn't really quite experienced anything like that before. But when it hit me about 6 months in working with him, it was like a huge revelation about time. Yeah. And I began to, you know, then we began to have fun, or I began to have very seriously, you know, I was deathly serious about the music. Yeah. Am I freezing?
No,
I'm sorry.
Okay.
You are too.
It's good. I hear everything. It's cool, right? Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, it's super. But okay. Did you ever, you mentioned that Horace kind of gave you tips and lessons or how to play the music. Did Roy do that as well? Or did you guys talk about the music, what to play? And
no, Roy never said anything except he would express his displeasure on the drums, in the music. And, you know, he would roll his eyes a lot. You know, he might give me a chorus and then he'd start bashing all over me because, you know, and I realized I have to give him everything I've got just to keep him interested. You know, this is a man that's played with everybody from Prez to Bird to, you know, just Bud, you know, he's the history of the music. Yeah. And, you know, my little squall that I was playing was like, it was just pissing him off, to be quite honest. But, you know, after some months, I began to get it because he's talking to me the whole time on the drums. You know, I would go into a phrase, and of course, he knew everything I was going to play before I even played it.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, and you know, and I realized he's capping my phrase. He's setting up my phrase. You know, he knows what and then I began to realize I need to talk to him too.
Mm.
And when I began to talk to him in the music, now we have a back and forth dialogue. Now it's better. Now he's not so upset with me. Now he's like, okay, now you're getting it type of thing. You know, and I learned buku knowledge from that guy about swinging, about the time, phrasing, you know, dialogue, talking to the other musicians on the bandstand. I learned that from Roy.
Did you guys also tour Europe with that quartet? Like,
yeah,
you did, right? Yeah.
It was a quintet for a while because Donald came back.
Ah, really?
Know?
I didn't. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so for a while it was two horns. It was alto and tenor.
Oh man.
You know, and Donald and I would battle it out on the front line. You know, we two hungry young saxophone players. You know, it was a bloodbath a lot of nights. You know. Roy would call something like Donna Lee, and you know, we play, then we do choruses, then we do 60s and 8s, then 2s, then 1s, you know.
Oh man.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, man. I loved playing with Donald back in those days.
Yeah, I mean, he's a fantastic player also. Yeah. But well, how did round trip happen for you? Because you were still fairly young, and
How did what happen for me? I missed that.
round trip.
Oh, well, I would get gigs and opportunities from being on jobs. People would hear me. How did I get round trip? I did a record with Valerie Ponomarev, I think. He was doing a record. These two doctors, Bob Sonnenblick and Mark Feldman, started this label called Uptown Records. And they wanted to record Valerie. Well, I'd been working with Valerie at the time. And so I went in with Valerie to record the record. And they heard me and all of a sudden wanted to record me. I think that's how it happened. I got a lot of opportunities like that. I joined Cedar's band on a record date, on a Freddie Hubbard record date, where Cedar's trio was the rhythm section with Billy Higgins. And, on the second day of the recording, they wanted to give Freddie a break. So they said, Freddie, you go home and take a break. Let's do a quartet record. So Cedar's looked at me and said, well, what can we do? And I, of course, I know some Cedar's music. I knew a lot of it, in fact. So, because I came up listening to Cedar, just like I came up listening to Horace, and I knew his music. So we got to the piano for about 10, 15 minutes, and we played this head and we played that head. And Cedar looked up and said, I think we got a record here. Okay. And so we recorded that record. But back to what you were saying, the round trip, I got that record date from those guys hearing me on another recording they were doing. Same with Jerry Teakins. I was doing
Crisscross. Yeah.
I did a record with Jimmy Nepper.
Oh yeah.
And Jerry Teakins came out and said, I want to record you too. I mean, that's how things happen. That's a natural sort of way things happen, And I listen, I don't fault the musicians that are out there today trying to establish something. It is what it is.
But it is different,
But it's different, yeah. Back in those days, you could get exposure and get heard by working with different people. It's not so easy now, because you can't work like that now. We were going all over the country. We would go to Europe. I went to Japan with Horace, we were just out there. And of course, it's Horace Silver's quintet. So back in those days, it was like, well, who's the new guy with Horace? It was always like, who's the new guy with so-and-so? Or Blakey, guy with, you know what I mean? And so people were like, they were listening. And you were on the bandstand and you're getting experience. And that nowadays you don't have that opportunity really. You may get a gig, you may get a weekend, but you're not going to get like a 3-month tour, 6 nights a week.
Invaluable lessons. It's like a university in itself.
There are still always some good, there's always a handful of good young players, man.
Oh, sure.
In spite of everything, because that's just nature, right? And nature's going to do what it does. You'll get a guy from Timbuktu. Have you heard this guy from Timbuktu? I don't know how he learned to play like that, but he's 12 years old and he plays like that. That's just nature, man. There's no accounting for that. And so there's always a handful of really good young players out here that want to carry the music. They just don't have quite the same opportunity, but they make it somehow. They
different ways.
Yeah.
But speaking of that Jerry record, I mean the Crisscross one. I remember the first time I heard it, like Un Poco Loco starts and it goes on for 10 minutes. And it's just like, Billy and Buster and, Kikoski are burning and you are as well. And how did that hook up with Buster and Billy actually happen? Did Jerry fix that up or did you play with those guys?
I had
like a dream rhythm section. I mean,
I got to work quite a bit with Buster and Billy on the Mingus Dynasty. Was that a septet? before the big band, it was a septet, the Mingus Dynasty. And I got on that band one winter, I think it was the winter of 85. That December, I got a call from another saxophone player, Alex Foster.
Yeah, sure.
And he said, I can't make this gig. Can you do it? It's a month with Dynasty. And I said, I'd love to do it. And so I ended up on that gig. And at that time, it was Randy Brecker, myself, Jimmy Nepper, that's where I met Jimmy, and John Handy for the horns. And the rhythm section was, it began with Eliane Elias, the bass player that was living in Bern that passed recently, Johnson. His name is vague. A sweet guy, wonderful bass player. Oh man, why can't I remember his name? Okay, that's unforgivable. And the drummer was Billy Hart. So, but the band changed. In came in the course of the tour, the piano player changed from Eliane to, I think, Horace Parlin came in for a few nights.
Wow.
Roland Hanner did a week or two. And the bass player, Reggie Johnson left, and Buster Williams came in. So now it's Buster Williams, Billy Hart, and at that point it was Roland Hanner. So the personalities kept changing, and each time the personalities changed, the sound of the band would change because they're such strong players, right? But I made a real connection with Buster and Billy on that tour, and they sort of brought me in under their wing, so to speak. I was still pretty young, and I began working with Buster a little bit in his band after that, and the first opportunity I got, because Jimmy Nepper, after that tour, he brought me into his recording for Chris Cross, which is where Tikins heard me. And then he offered me a date, and I said, I want to play with Buster, Billy, and David. It was all very organic in those days, So, David helped me pull the music together. And, I think we made one rehearsal with Billy and Buster, and then we show up at Rudy's, and these guys came to play, right? So at one point during the session, Rudy was saying, "It's too fucking loud." Rudy didn't bite his tongue, and he came out with the plexiglass and his gloves on, and he slammed the plex in the drum booth. He's trying to control the sound because we were like going at it full throttle. And as you mentioned, these tunes were long, because my conception at the time was like, well, I like it when it's going flat out. I don't like these sessions where it's like, okay, pay attention because and there's too many signals and I just wanted to play, and let it go down on tape, which is essentially what happened on that recording. And I think everybody had a lot of fun, man. Because Buster and Billy had such history playing together.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And I had history playing with David, and he's another one that's going to go flat out, into the music. And so I'm like surrounded by this rhythm section that is about to bury me here because I can't barely keep up with these guys. But it was great energy, and it was great fun. Did
you feel the pressure of being a band leader, or was this like organic, like a quartet unit, or did you have?
Well, I went into the studio and I didn't try to be the leader. I mean, how are you going to be the leader of these guys?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah,
that's absurd, right? So I didn't even try to take that approach. Yeah. I knew that they were going to make the music. I knew that they knew what to do. I just counted it off. Or sometimes I let Billy, you count it off. I never had any, I'm the leader of the band type ego because I was surrounded by veterans back in those days. They already know what to do, Ralph. You just show up and count the tune off.
Yeah, sure.
that was my attitude back then, and it was out of necessity because it was the truth.
Yeah.
And they made the record.
It's an incredible album. Still, that's what you said. It's just music.
Yes.
That's why with so many people I talk to now, even that record still, everyone is like, man, 62-3C, that's one of the best from the 80s, because it's really, you put it on, it's just like, man, the energy you guys have on that one is just like, woo.
Yeah, I love that. I would love to do. Those guys are all still here. I would love to do that again, man.
That would be fun. That would be fun, actually, now.
That.
Like almost 40 years later, 30, 35.
Yeah.
Would be interesting. Yeah. Would be fun. Yeah, but Ralph,
I'm sorry.
No, I wanted to...
No, I'm sorry.
No, what did you want to say? Go ahead. Sorry.
That record actually came out before the Reservoir record, because even though the Reservoir record was recorded earlier, those two doctors, they didn't get along, and they disbanded, and they split up the catalog, and that was all going on. In the meantime, Jerry had me do this record, 623 C Street, and it came out,
before,
earlier, first. It came out first.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, okay, cool. How was it then for you? Like, was there like a young lion scene in the mid 80s or not really, like, which emerged kind of later in the 90s? Or
well, the Young Lions idea is actually a lot older than that.
Yeah,
it goes back to
kind of Art Blakey and all these guys, kind of.
That conception of the Young Lions. In the 80s, with Wynton's success, I guess it became apparent to the people in the business, in the industry, in the record labels and whatever, that actually, if we package this right, maybe there's some money to be made in jazz. That sounds ridiculous, but that's prior to that. I went to New York. I had no notion of making any money. I wanted to learn how to play. And that concept is now pervaded, the scene, it seems. People want to, they want to get a lot of likes. They want to, get their stuff out there. They want, it's all a lot of promotion.
Yeah.
And of course, Wynton took his thing to the heights, but I think for most other musicians, that's not perhaps a realistic notion. Even with all the technology today that we have, and the information, and the ability to make your own records, and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
The notion that you're going to get rich playing jazz is still, to me, I'm an old head. It's still like, that's not realistic, dude, And there are some guys that have been able to break away from the pack and do well for themselves. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think you should, in order to have some staying power here and be able to deal with the scene and have some longevity, you need to be realistic.
Yeah.
Maybe I sound like a Debbie Downer here. I don't mean
no, but you need to love it also. I mean, it's
I was born in 56. When I got my first horn in 1969, and my she's watching me practice, and she's watching me slowly take over her record collection. And finally she said, "Look, you take the turntable in your room." Because I would sit by the record, and I'm trying to pick out notes, and she's like, take it in your room. Take the records, take the turntable. And after a while, she said, "You're really into this thing, right?" And then I said, "Yeah, I'm going to be a jazz musician."
When you were like 13 or?
Yeah,
oh,
And she's like, "Well, you're probably going to starve to death." My mom and her brother were tap dancers during vaudeville.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, so they knew about show business. My mom knew about it. She knew it was rough. And she said, "You're probably going to starve to death, but it's important to have something that gives your life meaning. And so, I support you all the way with this." And so right from the beginning, I had no notions of making money or being famous or anything like that. I just wanted to be one of the cats, you know. And I came to New York with that attitude.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people did. It's not quite the same anymore, you know. People are concerned about, well, I've got a wife and a kid, and you know, I've got to make some money, and so I need to teach. But when I got to New York, it was, I don't care about anything. I'm going to live in a cardboard box if I have to. I just want to get around some of these guys and learn how to play.
Yeah.
There was no computers. There was no World Wide Web, you know, and consequently, those distractions weren't there either.
Oh yeah, I mean, sure. You could
Yeah.
actually practice for 6 hours without doing like.
Yeah.
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 Which were the first records you took out from your mom's
My mom's.
record collection? Yeah, that kind of intrigued you.
I loved Louis Armstrong. I mean,
really?
that's
wow.
what really, I mean, I play music because Louis Armstrong in the 60s, he had sort of a comeback.
Yeah.
With Hello Dolly and those shows, you know. And so they were playing Louis Armstrong on the radio in the 60s, along with the Beatles, and you know, Sinatra had a hit, what was it, My Way? Back, radio used to be, you would hear everything.
Yep.
You wouldn't have like a smooth jazz and then a rock station and then a hip hop station and a class. Back in those days, it was just the radio.
Yeah.
And you would hear, you know, James Brown would be followed by Tower of Power, would be followed by Joni Mitchell, would be followed by Dolly Parton, would be followed by, you know, AWB, Average White Band. I mean, it was just, you were hearing everything, you know. And so, you know, I was influenced by those times. And my mom had some Zoot Sims. She had some Basie. She had some Earl Garner. She had some Earl Hines, which I eventually saw Earl Hines. She took me to see Basie when I was about 13 years old.
Oh wow!
You know, my mom was into the music. She had Sarah Vaughan and Dinah Washington, and you know, she just had a rich collection.
Yeah.
You know, and that's how I got turned on to the music, from my mom's collection. Yeah,
amazing. Yeah, I love that. I remember that too, picking out LPs, discovering that we had LPs at home, and then, you know, George Benson's.
Yeah.
I was like, man, Breezin', I think, record, and I was like, man, what is this, you know?
Yeah, sure.
This same moment, I love this. And with your generation, of course, that's even more. Just imagine, you know, the LPs and then going to the shops to buy LPs and saving up, and every week a new record.
I would spend hours in the records.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Back in those days, you would pick a record based on the sidemen. Well, who's on, oh, so-and-so's on it. Okay, let me check that out. You know, and on the radio now, they don't even tell you who the sidemen are.
Oh, sure.
It's terrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
When that record Breezin' came out, of course, we knew who George Benson was, right? And then George's son, George Benson, blew up. You know, and people were going crazy about George Benson. Well, we all knew who George Benson was. He's a jazz guitarist, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that thing. I mean, it especially when records came out, you actually went to buy a record. Now it's just like an overflow. And back then, even when I was like a teenager, I still went to a store and like I had 4 CDs and I was able to afford one because, you know, I didn't have enough. So I was like, okay, I'll take this.
Yes.
And then I wore out that CD. Yeah, exactly. And
significant.
You remember every solo, every hat, every drum solo, everything, because it was the only record you could listen to for 2 weeks, you know, or something.
Yeah. Exactly.
I love this romantic. I'm getting old too, I guess. So shit.
Well, I was looking at your T-shirt. Every once in a while, when you get higher, I'm like, oh yeah, I played in that club many times.
Oh yeah,
Sweet Basil.
Who did you play? Did you play with Art also there, or?
I played in Sweet Basil. The last gig I did before I left New York to come out to LA was with Hank Jones at Sweet Basil. Tom Harrell. Hank Jones, George Mraz, Louis Nash, and myself.
Oh man.
In Sweet Basil. It was a New Year's Eve week. We played that week.
That's a nice band. Wow. Masters, all of them.
It was a nice room, man. I used to go here and there and hear Art Blakey or Seated, the trio with Ron and Billy Higgins many times. And, you know, Nat Adderley played in there.
Yeah.
You know, those were wonderful times, man. Really wonderful day.
All these clubs, that you mentioned, all Bradley's and all these beautiful stuff, But Ralph, I wanted to ask you before, just you mentioned Freddie and Cedar, you know, with David and Billy, that record that you guys did. And how was your experience with Freddie? Like, I mean, we started with trumpet players with Roy Hargrove, and I wanted to ask you also your story with Freddie.
I idolized Freddie.
Wow.
To sit in a room when Freddie was playing trumpet, when he was really playing now, because his lip got messed up after a while. But I remember like it. There was just nothing like it. It was incredible. The guy could hear paint dry. He would hear incredible things. And just, you know, and then he would just, because he had such bravado, you know, Freddie was real character, man. And he would reach for that stuff, man. And even if he didn't make it, it was just so incredibly exciting. You know, and most of the time he made it, you know, but he would play full out, full bore with everything he's got, all his heart and soul and his guts and everything. He would put in that horn, man. And it was just an incredible thing. You know, I worked in his band for a few years. And before we did that record, you know, I had been playing with Freddie. That's how I got into the session. Freddie brought me in. And my God, Freddie Hubbard, man, I would stand right underneath him, right on his left side. You know, we'd be on the front line, and I'd be watching his fingers and watching the velocity of the air come out of the horn, and I would hang on every note, man. I would hang on every note, and then I would go home and I'm practicing, and I'm trying to reimagine my lines the way he played his. You know,
oh man.
And you know, of course, I would never in a million years could I ever rise to the level of Freddie Hubbard, but I think I learned some things from him, man. I lived for it. Of course, he was a crazy Aries. You never knew what was going to happen, and so there was that element too. But that element was good too, because, you know, Freddie would get on a bandstand, he would call a tune, he would stump his foot. That's how he would count it off. And he would go, such and such, and the band might not know the tune. You know, I remember one night the Blue Note. He called Crisis. He had a band out in LA. They always played Crisis. The New York band never played it with him. So he says Crisis. And he stumps it off, ba-da-da, and he's playing it like it's the last song he's ever going to play, because that's how he played. And nobody comes in, and he stops, and he goes, we don't know that. Because he would always look at me for the tunes, because I knew I had a list. He said, you know, he was, you got the music, you got the list, you know. And, you know, I said, no, Freddie, we don't know that one. He said, oh, okay. And he called off another one and stumping, and we play again. But that's how much tension was on the bandstand with Freddie. You just never knew what was going to happen, man. You know, the first gig, how I got on the band was Carl Allen called me up and said, Freddie, we were playing at Newark there was a place called Mr. West. We're playing in Newark. Freddie needs a tenor player. Come on down. And he gave me a list of about 12 tunes. He said, I don't know what he's going to call, Ralph, but lately we've been these, you know, he might call something here. Well, we get on the gig. The first tune he called is Intrepid Fox. And he he goes, Intrepid Fox. Well, that was one of the tunes that Carl had given me to study. So I knew it. So I was on it, you know, and I got through that head with him, you know. And, you know, another one he called that night was a Theme for Kareem. And I swear, man, that tune is in a tricky key. It's a lot of flats. And it's a lot of dominant chords, and you know, and he played. I cannot describe to you how he played, what he played. He played for like 10 minutes, and the impression I left with was like the rhythm section was hanging onto his right ankle, and he was just dragging them along. He was like, oh, he was such a fierce player, man. He could get out ahead of the rhythm section. I mean, he was so fast. He could think so fast. And I remember leaving that gig. I couldn't sleep. I was just like electrified, going home, you know. And yeah, Freddie was an incredible musician, and I absolutely adored him. He was erratic, and I was always careful around him. I was always very respectful. I was always very respectful of all those guys. But Freddie could flip on you, you know, and then it was just crazy on the bandstand a lot of times. But the music was way higher. The music was just incredible.
Were these tours tough, like with Freddie? Like musically, were they tough?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, he was calling tunes like "Take It to the Ozone" and "Intrepid Fox," you know, and then he would be funky. He would, you know, Red Clay.
Yeah, okay.
And you know, he wasn't afraid to get. Freddie could be just the most greasy, ignorant, funky, and the most sophisticated, hip, you know, heavy, right in it within 8 bars.
Yeah.
You know, he could the range of it would happen within 8 bars, and you just, you know, and he of course his ballad playing was exquisite.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah. And I would bury my sound inside of his, you know, and get this really gorgeous brassy burnished tenor trumpet front line, man. I loved Freddie. I loved him, man. I did a tour in Europe with McCoy Tyner's trio and then Freddie on front, and that was just
really
out of this world. Yeah, it was out of this world. And you know, most of the time I was almost too scared to play, because and then I realized with McCoy, there's no such thing as wrong notes. You know, it's all about your intent, you know. And so then I began to loosen up and just, you know, allow my emotions to become more involved in the music. You know, I idolized those guys so much that I was always nervous playing with them, you know.
How was the McCoy experience for you? I mean,
McCoy was beautiful. He was the sweetest man. So unpretentious, just really down to earth, both feet on the ground. He treated me with all the respect. He treated me like a friend, you know.
Incredible.
I remember one time we were in maybe we were in Nice, and we pulled the rehearsal. Never rehearsed. Freddie never rehearsed anything, not for a record or anything. And he wanted to teach McCoy this tune, Dear John, which is giant steps. You know, you can imagine why are you teaching McCoy that? You think he don't know that? But he wanted him to get these kicks, and so he ran through the head a couple of times. Freddie didn't have a lot of patience. In fact, they used to live together in Brooklyn when they.
Oh, really? I didn't. Wow.
They were very close, and it was a very, you know, comfortable relationship with them. And at one point he went and he elbowed McCoy off. No. And he elbowed McCoy off the piano and sat down and banged out this thing. You know, McCoy's looking over him watching. And all I could think of, man, dude, you just shoved McCoy off the piano. You're going to go to hell for that. You must be. There's got to be a place in hell for people that shove McCoy Tyner off the piano. But McCoy didn't even give it a second thought. You know, he's like, okay, what do you know? And he sat down, he go like this and said, yeah. You know, that was a Freddie Hubbard rehearsal.
That's beautiful, man.
Yeah.
That's so cool. It's like this is a story now. If you were a fly in a studio, you know, like in a Blue Note session in 19, I don't know when, 61 or something. That's like one of those moments. No, I love this.
I cherish those moments, all of those moments with all of those people, man. You know, being out on the road with Dizzy was incredible, you know, because the reception that he got was just like, oh, the heavyweight is in town.
Super stuff, yeah.
You're part of that entourage, you know.
Yeah.
You know.
How was Bobby like, Hutcherson?
Bobby, but here we go again.
I mean, I love the track record you guys did. It's such a beautiful.
I was on a gig with Freddie Hubbard in Missouri, somewhere in Missouri. I don't remember the town. Featuring, it was a Freddie Hubbard quintet featuring Bobby Hutcherson. Freddie doesn't show up. So now it's just the quartet with Bobby. So Bobby's like, well, you know, what do you want to play? You guys know this, you know, yeah, we pull a set together, we go out and play. Bobby pulls me onto his record date after that, which is Cruising the Bird. Again, that's how things would happen, you know. Had I had to, like the young guys have to do today, self-promote myself and enjoy, you would have never heard of me because I didn't have a personality like that. You know, I was very sort of introverted and not, you would have never heard of me. It was only because the scene was different. Yeah. And things happened differently that I got the opportunities that I got. You know, I was a wallflower. I never said a word almost when I'm back in those days. I was very shy and withdrawn, you know. I was just about the music. Yeah. These days, you're going to die the death because you've just got to get out there somehow.
Yeah, sure. It's completely different. But yeah, I mean, when you're on stage with, the masters you were, there's not really much to say than just listen, right? I mean, also.
Of course, when I'm out with Horace, I'm the new guy, and there's 5 or 6 tenor players at the bar watching me. You know, it's intense. You know, any one of them
could be,
could probably do this gig. You know, or they feel they could. You know, because there was a lot of good players around too. You know, somebody's got to get the gig. I got it. And now the pressure is on to hold on to it.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, it's yours to lose, dude. And there's 6 tenor players over there. You miss a step, you know.
Amazing.
Amazing. It was intense back in those days.
Amazing.
You know, you learned by fire.
Yeah, but that's the best. Go in the water and swim, I guess. You know, or beautiful.
Yeah, stand back. Take a big long run and jump as far out into the river as you can and try to swim.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Super. Cool, Ralph. I won't take more of your time. I mean, thanks so much for sharing already some of this stuff. And so nice to hear you talk, you know.
Oh, man, my pleasure. Man, I know that you didn't get asked many questions. I was just running my mouth the whole time.
Oh, no, man. It's about you, you know. It's like I love listening.
We didn't get into the other young players that were around at the time, you know. But it was a wonderful time.
What?
But
Sorry,
thank you for this, man. No, I.